We are back today here to talk about gentle parenting.
Yeah, yes, we are. Which you and I are both experts in.
I would not claim to be an expert in any style of parenting. I am in with the people who say it's a work in progress at all times, being a parent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I tend to find that the people who are quote unquote experts on parenting, I tend to not really like their advice very much sometimes, I feel like.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But as someone who is an expert parent, let me just say you are doing a good job, Jackson.
Wow.
It's okay.
This is great.
It's okay.
Phew.
You know, I'm up to 3 now. I don't know if you realize that. Children, that is.
Three. Yes, 3 children.
3 children, yes.
I'm familiar with that.
And don't mean to brag, but I parent them all myself. Well, me and my wife. But yeah, so I'm an expert. So I have all the authority necessary to talk about this.
I saw you coming through the line, as we often do, at the school today. And so we did that parenting job, the old drive to school. I think all the time when I'm driving to school about when my mom would drive me to school, and it's such a different thing, when you're a kid and it's just kind of like, you never know where you're going.
Yeah.
Like, couldn't have gotten to the school if I needed to. But, and I think about that often now. I'm talking to my boys while they're in the back seat while I'm driving them to school, and I'm sure they have no idea where anything is in town. Just, like I didn't. Obviously, this is a much bigger city than what I grew up in, so it's harder to know where things are. But
do they ever think they know where it is and they try and correct you if you're driving somewhere?
No.
Okay.
No, they're always doing something in the back seat. They don't pay a lot of attention.
All right, I've got a watcher. Elijah, he's a watcher. He's watching where we're going. And if he thinks I've done something wrong, like made a wrong turn or whatever, he will tell me.
Nice.
And it's impressive sometimes where it's like, man, how did you realize that? Like sometimes I'm going just a different way on purpose, or sometimes he thinks we're going to a certain place, we're going somewhere else. But then there was one time recently, actually yesterday, where we were driving from my mom's house to First Southern, and we're going, and he informs me, Dad, you passed First Southern. And I said, no, I haven't. He said, yes, you did. I saw it. You passed it. You went the wrong way. No, I didn't, buddy. We're going the right way. Nuh-uh. And it was one of those moments where I found myself in an argument with my 5-year-old, an argument that does not matter at all.
Yeah.
But I stuck with it. I kept arguing with him. It didn't matter. And then we got to First Southern, and I was like, see?
And
didn't take a wrong turn. And he said, no, you did. And I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing?
All right, well, it turns out I should let this go.
Yeah, I should have. But, so maybe I'm not an expert in parenting. I don't know. But it sure is fun. It sure is fun. I think parenting is a blast as much as it is.
Yeah.
It's got difficulties.
Yeah, we've had some really good moments this last week. One of these crazy February mornings where we were both disc golfing with some other guys that we know this past Sunday, and that I brought my 2 boys, first time they've ever been disc golfing, and I guess I'm going to count this as the time they went disc golfing, even though they probably threw a total of a frisbee maybe 10 times, 15 between the 2 of them. But they spent more time since we've recently had this winter storm. That means there are so many limbs down on the disc golf course, and that was way more fun for my boys to just climb on those and use them as like a sideways trampoline or something, however you want to say. And so they had a blast doing that, and that was you have moments sometimes as a parent where you go like, I think they're going to remember this. Like I think this is one of those good things that's just happened. So it was a good time. And after we left, I asked them if they had a good time, and they say, yeah, this was great. So that for them too, they thought, yeah, this was my first time disc golfing, and that was a lot of fun. That was cool.
Yeah, I'm glad they had a good time. I was glad when you said that they both said they had, because it is fun watching them just do like kid things, especially little boy things.
Yep.
Like this is literally, we turned one time and it's like, there they are just cracking up just on a fallen branch, big fallen branch, just bouncing up and down on it as though it's just like the coolest playground ever.
Yep.
And that was them for most of the round. I mean, they were just, what other thing can we find to play on? And they were living it up. That was fun.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But that does lead us then to kind of our topic of conversation today. This is an article that you sent me from the Gospel Coalition by Trevin Wax. and in it he's addressing a sort of modern theory of parenting, and the title on Gospel Coalition's website is called "The Church's Opportunity When Gentle Parenting Crashes." This was written February 4th of this year, so just not very long ago from where we're at now, by Trevin Wax, and he is writing to address this trend of what's called gentle parenting. I think I would say first and foremost, as we start and we get into what is gentle parenting, the name gentle parenting is something of not a misnomer, but like,
Oh, I would certainly call it a sales term.
a sales term. Yeah, a euphemism, you might say, because you're going to hear that Trevin Wax and myself and you included, we're opposed to gentle parenting, but that is not to say that we are for harsh or mean parenting or what's another word that's opposite of gentle? Rough parenting, right? That it doesn't.
We're not for domineering parenting. We're
Yeah.
not for rude parenting. I don't know. There's a lot of opposites of anything, but no, we're not for any of that. Because at the end of the day, I mean, one, we recognize gentleness as a fruit of the Spirit.
Yes.
But I think a more proper name for this style of parenting would be therapeutic parenting. And therapeutic worldview has its limits, such that gentleness, isolated out, the elements of gentleness that the Bible describes, many of them don't fit into a therapeutic worldview, because the therapeutic worldview looks at people and goes, well, these poor people, they just haven't been helped as much as they need in their life. And that's the therapeutic view of people, that, well, if they were just given the right chance, they would do right and good and be helpful. And it is not true.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good term, therapeutic parenting, or maybe accommodating parenting, or something like that, because a lot of the way the theory kind of comes down. But this is sort of what gentle parenting is. It's a philosophy of child rearing centered on, and I'm reading from the article here, centered on mutual respect, emotional empathy, and positive rather than negative discipline, so that the parent-child relationship is marked by understanding and guidance, never scolding, punishment, or obligation, end quote. And that's where you see kind of that therapeutic parenting or accommodating parenting style is kind of what we were talking about. This is juxtaposed to a position, an understanding of parenting that you and I would hold to or adopt, even though we don't maybe have a name for the theory, but that includes these things that they say aren't included. So like, Jackson, do you ever scold or punish your children?
Yes.
Yes. Do your children...
This is like the best game show I've ever had an opportunity to be on. All right. Go,
yes.
What else you got?
Do your children have obligations that you place upon them?
Certainly.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, man. 2 for 2. Me too. And we understand that a part of forming children, raising children, helping them understand and learn and grow as children requires these things.
Yeah.
They are not something that are to be seen as bad or avoided, but rather they are at times necessary and good.
Right. Yeah. I'm just to the point to where I can view these in a joyful manner, because I think that it benefits kids so much to have limits, to let them know very clearly, this is when you cross the line. And when you cross the line, there is punishment for that. So say you hit your brother with your fist. That is crossing a line, and you should be punished for that, not in a harsh way. Harsh meaning the punishment should always fit the crime, but you should clearly understand why you're being punished, why that was wrong, and how that is just not an acceptable behavior. That is a benefit to a child. A child that doesn't receive that cannot gain a clear understanding of how the world works. Won't have a clear understanding of the value of other people, for instance, in the example that I'm making. And so, I am having what is strange in part for me, thinking about therapeutic worldview versus biblical worldview, is that I kind of came out of a very therapeutic worldview. And I can remember how exhausting it is, and how you don't ever really get answers when you're trying to all the time think of people and the world as, well, obviously everybody's good, and if you just give them a chance, they will do better and they'll do right. it's like, well, that doesn't fit with any sort of real assessment of what's happening in the world.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, people, even when they're well-fed and warm and the day's going their way, can be cruel, can be short and mean and coarse and rough, and that includes the smallest versions of people, children. It's just, that's just the reality.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And with that understanding of reality, we begin to see where gentle parenting, as it's been termed, kind of falls apart. The goal of gentle parenting, according to the article, is Trevin Wax is writing, the goal is to increase a child's emotional intelligence by responding to things that they have done, ways that they've behaved or acted, that we would normally respond right in discipline, you and I. The article says, in gentle parenting, you would respond in a calm and positive way when behavior crosses a line, redirecting the child's self-expression towards something healthier or more socially acceptable. A tantrum, the article goes on, is merely the result of frustration. Bad behavior arises from unmet needs.
Yeah.
This is where you're talking about the therapeutic, right? The idea is when a child is misbehaving, is acting poorly, is, say the illustration you used earlier, has hit a brother or sister, the therapeutic approach, the gentle parenting approach, is to say, okay, what's going on that made you behave that way? How are you feeling? What can we do to change sort of the environment so that you are redirected to something more positive, so you have a better outlet to express your feeling, these kinds of things. And there's a part of that, like, we talk about a child's emotional intelligence. That's their goal, is to really grow that.
Yeah.
Well, we would say, yes, a child's emotional intelligence is something that we need to foster, that we need to grow.
Right.
But a part of how we do that is by helping them see and understand what is an appropriate emotional response to certain situations, which means we have to make clear there are some responses that are inappropriate and wrong.
Yeah.
And that is something that the gentle parenting approach would say, you don't really tell them that what they're doing is wrong. You just simply try and get them to choose the more desirable thing by identifying their thoughts, behaviors, what has sort of gone wrong for them, why things aren't going their way. Remedy that, like I said, accommodate that, so that in hopes you'll get things sort of put correct in this equation, that then the answer that is spit out will be one of them choosing the desirable thing rather than the non-desirable thing. Yeah. And throughout this sort of the gentle parenting style, they avoid using words like wrong behaviors or bad behaviors or things like that. It's always, more desirable, less desirable, right? In this therapeutic approach.
And I don't want to overplay my hand on this, but we will have to make examples. And to anyone listening, I want to say that I don't want to make unreasonable examples, but I have seen this in action, and seeing that it is sort of the latest parenting trend that has caught on, I think is a huge problem, because it does, since it's based on a false view of human nature, it's going to lead to new kinds of problems down the road. Mm-hmm. And so when you're talking about redirecting a child's behavior, you have to make examples. And so it's like, okay, you said something mean to your sister. You told her that she looks stupid or something, and you said something mean to her. Well, wouldn't you rather be over here and color your paper like you were planning on doing? It's like, no, I mean, I just look at that and go, you need to correct that behavior, not try to pull this child. Wouldn't you rather do this positive thing? Look, there are levels where all of us have moved towards replacement of behaviors. And in fact, there are places in Christian discipleship to go, here, put off that old behavior, put on this new behavior. It's language that's in the Bible. But when you refuse to say, because that behavior is wrong.
Right.
You create a very unhealthy situation, because if you couch it in the language of choice, wouldn't you rather choose coloring over being mean to your sister? It's like, these are not morally similar,
Right.
much less morally neutral. These are morally neutral attitudes or behaviors, and if that's how you're treating them, that's just a lie.
Right.
So there are just huge problems on the face of this.
Yeah, even the line that's quoted in the article, and this is when he's explaining, laying out what this gentle parenting approach is. The last two sentences I read a second ago said, a tantrum is merely the result of frustration, and then bad behavior arises from unmet needs.
Yeah.
It is the idea that, like, well, the idea is if your child has everything they need, if you just give them what they need, they will behave appropriately. Right. They will choose what is best and what is most appropriate. And this is going to lead us into sort of our next point. What's the problem with that understanding? What's the problem with that idea that if only they have all of their needs met correctly, then they will behave good and right? They'll do what they're supposed to do. Well, the problem with that is an understanding of what lies at the heart of the issue. When you talk about a child saying something mean to their brother or sister, saying you look ugly, saying this or that, being mean, that isn't coming out of a vacuum. It isn't coming out of a void.
Right.
It's coming from inside their heart. The Bible says, from out of the mouth, the heart speaks. And elsewhere, Jesus himself says, it's not what goes into a person that defiles them, but what comes out, because that's what comes from the heart, right? Yeah. When we see these behaviors, these things in our children, we recognize and we understand that they're coming from someplace. They're coming from their heart, right? These are expressions of what's going on in their heart. And by these expressions, we understand, we recognize that children are sinners.
Right.
They are what one of my professors in seminary called vipers in diapers. Even from the earliest age, they are sinful, right? And that sort of is a defining difference, is the answer to the question, are children inherently good? Right? That is the answer that the therapeutic approach, the gentle parenting approach puts forward, says, yes, they are inherently good.
Right. If you knock the roadblocks out of the way for them to be good, they'll be good. That is the idea behind a therapeutic worldview.
Right. And what we understand as believers and those who know the Bible and trust the Bible, we say, no, in fact, children, like all humanity, like every person who has ever lived, is born with a corrupt nature, is born into sin, and they are marked by that. Right. And that is what is going to come out of them, because that is what is inherent in them. Yeah. And this has been everyone since Genesis 3 that has been born that way. Yep. It is not the case that children grow and learn how to be bad. They learn how to behave poorly. Actually, I heard Pastor Dave point this out a lot whenever I was here at First Southern. He would preach. He would say things like this a lot. Something to the effect of, you don't have to teach a child how to sin. No one has ever had to teach their child that.
Yeah, you don't have to teach a child how to lie.
You don't have to teach a child how to lie. You don't have to teach them how to do any of these things. Yeah. It's sort of shocking, when your child first starts lying. Mm-hmm. It sometimes can catch you off guard.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like, where on earth did you learn that? And it's like, well, believe it or not, that was within them the whole time. Right.
What he says here, I think, is a really helpful quote. He says, quote, at the heart of this philosophy is the belief that children are, at their core, good, compassionate, loving, and generous. Affirming a child's internal goodness is meant to free parents to be curious about why their child might act out, end quote. That if you're operating off of that philosophy, half-truths can be so destructive. Look, we're made in the image of God, which means we see truth, we see goodness, we see beauty. But what can end up happening is we then assume, for instance, our own goodness. And I was talking to a friend of mine about bias the other day. And if you ever meet somebody who says they're unbiased in general, you should not trust them, or that they're unbiased even on a particular issue. And if you know a parent who cannot admit that they are biased toward their own children, 99% of parents are biased. Well, look, you're the first person on the planet who is supposed to take care of this tiny human being. You are put there by God to be their caretaker.
Right.
Yes, you're going to be biased toward their needs, their interests, and perhaps even biased towards their way of viewing things, assuming the best of them. But having a false view of human nature will lead you down a road where you don't know how to take care of them well.
Right.
And that's the biggest problem about it here. I appreciate it as well in this section about, children are inherently good. He also said this, quote, "Why is this approach caught on? In the dispatch, Megan Dent explains part of the appeal. It implies that simply meeting all a child's needs will improve their behavior. Let me just empathize with all parents right now.
Yeah.
We all want to improve our children's behavior.
Right.
So, coming back to this, affirming emotions, making children feel seen, or removing sources of stress is the key to raising compassionate and respectful adults in this matter of thinking, this mode of thinking. So affirming emotions, making them feel understood. And so some of the other quotes in this that I did not kind of set aside for us about, you've seen this practice of sort of when a child might do something wrong of saying, now did you understand that you shouldn't do that? How do you think that might make them feel? Some of these questions I think can be a part of a solution, but they are never the whole solution.
Right.
Because they assume that, okay, what do you do if your child says, no, I don't understand how they feel. I don't care how they feel. Well, okay, what do you do then?
Yeah.
What if they say, oh, I'm perfectly happy in my ignorance. I am not worried about how anybody else feels. Now, I know most all of us are shrewd enough to not say that out loud, but that is what we have all done, if we're honest with ourselves,
Right.
When we have ended up hurting other people, is gone, yeah, unfortunately for your needs, they conflict with my needs and desires, so you're about to see what's going to happen here,
Yeah. Yeah. Importantly, their desires. We so often, as children do, and as adults, we conflate needs and desires. And so often it is wrongfully misinterpreted that children's needs aren't being met when actually what isn't being met is simply their desires.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of at this point that I think the gentle parent is to a certain degree stumped whenever they try and get a child to understand. Now how do you think they felt when you did that? And they say, don't care. Yeah, I don't care. And what do you do as a parent trying to live out this gentle parenting model?
Yeah.
Well, you have no recourse left at that point but to try and sweep it under the rug, divert them to something else, whatever. But that really you're confronted. It's sort of inescapable, in my view. You are going to be confronted with the child's sinful nature one way or another at some point or another. And the question is, how do you deal with it? You mentioned that some of those questions, asking questions as a part of this process can be good and helpful. And I think it can. And I think a part of how it can is if you are using these questions to guide them to try and understand their own sinful heart in that. I think if they can't get there with the help of the questions, then you just have to tell them, that is the role of a parent, to help them see and understand these things that they might not at first, right? You eventually have to come to the point where you say, what you did was wrong. That anger that you felt, as you're asking them about what are they feeling when you were doing that, what were you thinking? Well, if they're able to get to the point of saying, well, I was angry, you say, yeah, and that anger that you felt because of that was wrong and sinful, and it deserves punishment. And that has to be made clear if our children are going to grow and understand the difference between right and wrong, not just more desirable, less desirable, but between right and wrong. Yeah. It's not going to be as simple as just removing points of stress or sources of stress or whatever. It's going to take more assertiveness than that and honesty than that.
And I think on a lot of this, Chris, so how do you ultimately tell the difference, and why are we making such strong conclusions about why gentle parenting is not helpful, is that all humans are in the same position when we are in this moment of someone in authority saying to us, I caught you doing something unacceptable. And unfortunately, all humans have the same response usually in that situation, which is I'll say anything I got to say to get out of this situation right here where I'm being questioned on doing something wrong. And so the proof is in the pudding on, okay, when a child is caught in a bad behavior, if that behavior does not change, if that is just an unending cycle, then we are saying that is an ineffective parenting strategy. And often a child will in that moment acknowledge, oh yeah, that probably did make them feel bad when I hit them brother or whatever. Okay, yeah, but just having that acknowledged is not good enough.
Right.
Without an understanding of why that behavior was unacceptable, why it needs to change, what measures of discipline will encourage change in this child.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. The answer to the question is that children are not inherently good, and it's going to be bad for us if we operate out of that understanding that they are, but it's also going to be bad for them to think that they are.
Right.
They need to be exposed to their
Yeah.
to their sinfulness, and they need to understand that that it is wrong.
Yep.
And a part of that understanding comes through consequences.
Yep. Yep. And so his next section is called Flattening Your Kids. And I appreciate this quote so much. Quote, "The problem with gentle parenting is its reductive view of human nature." What does a reductive view of human nature mean, then?
Well, reductive meaning that there is far more to us as humans than is being acknowledged in this method, in this theory of parenting.
Right.
In the last section, he makes a statement, and he's talking about, he was talking about what this one person, Megan Dent, explained, that it implies that simply meeting all a child's needs will improve their behavior. And I think that word simply there is informative, because it is this idea that kids are basically just this, they're simple, and that if their needs are met, they will do what they're supposed to do, right? And it what it does then is it takes human nature and it flattens it out as though these are just biological, pre-programmed little beings that so long as you do what you're supposed to do and meet their needs as you're supposed to meet them, then everything will go correctly, right? Almost like a math equation. It's just so simple. You just plug in these things.
A lot of
and then boom,
behavioral
it's done.
psychology there, just like if you have these conditions being met, then you will behave in this way.
Yeah, and Trevin Wax and I would agree, Christians would respond and say, "Oh, if only it were that simple. If only it were as simple as all I have to do is meet my child's needs, and once their needs are all met, boom! At the end of this, we will have a wonderful, good, properly behaved child." It is not that simple.
Right.
It is not that simple. The fact of the matter is that children are complicated and fickle at times. And even, as you said at the beginning, even when all of their needs are met, we as human beings, I'm saying they because we're talking about children, but we as human beings, even with all of our needs being met, can still be bitter, angry. We still find that we don't treat people the way we ought, that we don't do what is good so often, and that is because we are not as simple as it is made out to be. Our human nature is not that flat that it can be so easily just understood and diagnosed and really just allowed to be what it needs to be.
Right.
It's not that simple.
Right. It's not. He says in here, quote, "Furthermore, it denies a child his or her full humanity as a moral agent because it refuses to acknowledge that sometimes our instinctive feelings aren't just impolite or inappropriate, but wrong. A child's actions are often not the result of frustration, but of selfishness. Our wills need to be restrained because our desires are corrupted," end quote.
Mm-hmm. Which really gets at what is the problem, and we're all over it at this point. But we are corrupted. Our desires are corrupted. What children want and desire, and is sometimes wrongly interpreted as needs, so often are coming from a place of wickedness. They're coming from sinful hearts.
Yep. And again, I can remember refusing to kind of think in such a way that some of my desires might be wrong. And frankly, I can remember what a freeing understanding it is to understand that, no, look, some of your desires are just wrong.
Yeah.
It's not that you need to kind of adjust some down and some up. It's that some of them you need to repent of and say, Lord, I turn from this desire. And then you can say, God, can you give me new desires?
Mm-hmm.
And those are the kind of prayers that I had never in a million years, when I first became introduced to Christianity, even for the whole first year I was around the church and church people, I never could have grasped that those would be the kind of prayers that would lead to such change in my life. Because when you're in a therapeutic mindset, you just think in terms of, well, obviously all my desires are pretty much right. And the question is only, how do I get my desires fulfilled and my needs fulfilled and my interests? How can I get the stuff that I want? And that oversimplified view of life is so common among us that the fact that we don't question it is a huge part of the problem, not just in our parenting strategies, but in our entire spiritual life.
Right. That's exactly right. And so we have to recognize, and this gets into the next section of the article, we have to recognize, even in our children, the pervasiveness of sin, that it is every part of the human experience. Every single part of it is touched by sin and the consequences of sin and the reality of sin. In other words, we live in a broken world, and we see that brokenness all around us, even in the hearts of our children, as much as we might not want to see it there, as much as we might not like that we see it there. It is there. As Christians, the article says, we realize the sin, the selfishness of child and parent alike will always foil the best intentions of the gentle parenting approach. Always. Yep. Sin in this case is the foil, both from your side and the child's side. And I appreciate that inclusion of parents in this, because there was a video I was watching one time, and it was, I think the caption said something like, the gentle parenting approach or something like that. And there was a mom sitting there, and the kid came up and was kind of grabbed her, pushed her, was clearly mad at the mom. And she says, hands are for hitting, or hands are for loving, not for hitting. And that kid turns around and just goes smack right across her face. I mean, just smoked her. Then turns around, grabs this little toy vacuum cleaner, whacks her upside the head with it. And it's just like, oh my goodness. I will give props to this woman. While her approach was terrible, and this kid was not responding to this gentle parenting approach at all, everyone watching the video, almost everyone, is going, that kid needs a little something, needs to go out behind the woodshed. People in the comments, and I think someone did a stitch on it where they were basically saying, I know what my mama would have done if I would have ever done anything like that to her. But I will say this, for that woman, her ability to not get mad in that instance, probably because she knew the camera was rolling, but still, think about how, I'm going to put it to you, Jackson, how would you respond if your child picked up a little toy vacuum cleaner, whacked you in the face with it? Would you be calm after that?
Spankings are a thing in our house, but I will say, I mean, one of the things about just biblical parenting is don't discipline when you're angry.
Exactly.
It's you have to be careful about that. All of us. I mean, what the theory is here, what you're working from in biblical parenting is, I know what my human nature is like. I know what human nature is like, and so I want to listen to God about how people are, how humans are, and how we can change, and then I want to, with wisdom, treat my children in a wise way and in a loving way by teaching them these are the kind of behaviors that are acceptable. These are the kind of behaviors that are unacceptable. This is a reasonable and just punishment for an unacceptable behavior. And so everything is on the table in terms of spanking is the last resort, timeouts, taking away things that they value, losing privileges, losing things like an allowance. I mean, you want to have, in my opinion, parents, you want to have all of these as options, because children are shrewd and their whole job is to assess their world and to figure out ways to get what they want. That is kind of what they spend most of their time doing. And you will quickly move as a new parent where you go, wow, this is an infant who just has needs. You will be amazed how quickly you're in a situation where that tiny human being begins to have feelings and desires of their own, and then a will that is completely different than yours, that is looking at you as an other and going, how can I get out of this person what I want? Or why is this person punishing me, and who do they think they are?
Right. And I agree with you, and we don't parent out of anger. But part of the point I was
Sure.
trying to get at is that I think what will result from this gentle parenting approach is that it allows this bad behavior to continue to grow and foster to the point it will eventually get to the point where your patients won't be able to tolerate it either.
Right. Think about, you should ask serious questions if your gentle parenting is producing a harsh, severe child.
Yeah.
You should ask what might be going wrong.
Yeah. Or bitterness in your heart towards your child.
Sure. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's what I could see resulting from this is that,
Yeah.
gosh, I just loathe being around my child because they're so
and
hard to control, you know?
And thankfully, all this points to the miracle of God that his ways are good, and they result not only in good between us and him, but in good between our relationships.
Yeah.
That it is a wonderful thing that loving God helps us to love others, whoever those others are. And these sorts of things, I mean, unfortunately, you're right in what you're saying, but it's often an afterthought for a parent to go, well, yeah, sure, it makes me frustrated or exhausted with my child that they might behave this way, but that's just what it is to be a parent. It's like, oh, no, it's not. No, it doesn't have to be that way.
No. And that will only grow.
Yeah.
That will only grow, and it will only result in estrangement eventually down the road. Yeah. But you mentioned children, when they're young. There is a reality for an infant, for a little bitty baby. It is the case that so often your role as a parent is meeting their needs, right? We don't do much discipline on a 3, 4, 5-month-old baby, right? But that doesn't mean that baby is somehow just pure good, right? This is a quote that Trevin Wax includes from Augustine's Confessions, where he sort of reflects on the selfishness that's evident even in infancy, even before a child has the awareness to judge right from wrong. He says this is Augustine now, "It is not the will of the infant that is harmless." In other words, he's saying it is not the will of the infant that is harmless, but the weakness of his little limbs. He goes on to say, "I myself have seen and observed a little baby rife with jealousy. He could not yet speak, but he went pale and cast a bitter glare at the child nursing at the breast beside him." And I don't know, I think that first statement that he says there, it's not the will of the infant that is harmless, but the weakness of his little limbs. In other words, sin has so affected the human race that even from infancy, even a baby would be happy to strike, to hurt, to do these things from his evil will that is not harmless. It is merely his size and his weak arms that prevents him from doing the kind of damage that his heart would allow him to do and even drive him to do.
Yep.
I think that's a profound statement, and I think a true statement on human condition. People might hear this and think it sounds like we hate babies. We just think like they're the worst. We do not. We love infants. We love our own children, our own babies. We love other people's babies. Yeah. Just recently, there was a guy I was having lunch with who showed me a picture of a friend of his. They just recently had their baby, and he showed me. I was like, "Oh man, what a cute little baby!" And his response was, "I don't think babies are all that cute." I was like, "No, I disagree. I think they're cute. I think they're precious. They're gifts from God, right?" It is our love for them, though, that drives us to say, there is something inside this baby that, as a parent, I want to help to push against. I want to help to allow them to see that this is not good and not right and not healthy to just let this have control. But most importantly than that, as they grow, it is my desire and my role as a parent to be able to expose them to the reality of what caused this heart condition in them, and to give them the solution, the remedy that is the gospel, that is Christ Jesus. Yep. And this can't be done from a gentle parenting style. Yeah. A gentle parenting approach, a therapeutic parenting approach with the starting point of my child is good, and I want them to see the goodness within themselves and to live that out. It undoes really what the gospel message tells us, which is that you are wicked and you are broken and you are sinful. But there is a cure to this. Not only are you wicked, broken, sinful, but you also deserve a much more severe punishment than your mother or your father's hand for this sinfulness, for this wickedness that dwells within you. You deserve something much more than that, and it will come for you except for Christ Jesus and his grace and his mercy, right? That is made available to you, each and every one of us. That is what we ultimately, through an appropriate parenting style, what we as Christians desire to bring to our children, to expose to them the reality of their sinfulness, and then give them the remedy, give them the gospel that addresses our deepest needs, the deepest parts of us, and all of it in Christ Jesus. Yeah. And I think that I'm jumping a little bit ahead, and I apologize, but that has to start with an understanding that Augustine had, that even in an infant, there is this will, this human nature, this sinfulness that is capable of very, very evil things.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I don't know if you've had any experience like this with your own children, but amidst all of the experiences that I had with it, that were wonderful about children are a gift, and it is the greatest privilege in my life to be a parent. I had these very curious experiences of, the parents always hear about, kids trying to put stuff into light sockets or, into sockets on the wall. And they do. And I can remember with our first child, he's trying to put some kind of piece of plastic into the outlet on the wall, or even a piece of metal. And even sometimes when you have the little covers over, they're trying to pull them off so that it's amazing, these sorts of things. And so then I slapped his hand, and he did it again, and I slapped his hand. And he looked at me, and I'm telling you, the look was entirely, who do you think you are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To tell me I can't do what I'm doing right now.
You're lucky I can't stand.
And you are in disbelief at first that this sort of thing happened. It's like, well, kid, I'm the one who's been keeping you alive for the last few months here. Done a lot of holding, a lot of, me and that woman over there, we've been pretty much keeping you going. But now there's none of that in that moment. It's look, I know what I'm about right now. I got a thing on my mind. I want to do it, and you're just in my way. That's all you are right now, and it's a very strange experience. And so I know exactly where that quote Augustine's talking about there. It's not an uncommon experience. In fact, it is one when you become a parent. If you're paying attention, you will have that, and it will come quicker than you probably expect. Yeah. So it's real. It is such a surprising experience to become a parent, because the way I've described it to a lot of people is the highs are higher and the lows are lower.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just it's like all of life is in sharper colors, because there's just more going on all day, every day. If you have never failed as a parent, your kid falls when, on concrete when you were supposed to be taking care of them, there is no guilt you feel when you go, I was supposed to be on top of this, and oh my gosh.
Did I ever tell you about my very first time watching Elijah? He was our firstborn, alone. So this was Kaylee had just gone back to school, and sort of the schedule we were on, I had one day a week that I was going to be home with him. The other days we had, different daycare lined up and stuff like that. But this was my first time ever. I mean, a brand new dad. She's just gone back to work. It's just me and Elijah at home. And day one, I drop him. I dropped him on day one. And,
there's nothing like it, huh?
Oh, it was the worst feeling in the world. I was like, I was stepping over a pillow that was on the floor that I had him laid on earlier, but stepping over it and literally just slipped and fell, and he kind of went right out of my hands and boom onto the thankfully carpet at that time. And like there's so much that you're feeling in that moment of I am a complete failure, my child is going to be brain dead, all this terrible stuff that's going on. And I was very comforted when I after everything was okay, he was okay, and I knew everything was fine. I was telling my brother-in-law Jason about it a few days later, and I was like, have you ever dropped any of your kids? He said, I've dropped every one of my kids. He will be just fine. It was very good. But you're right. I mean, it never would have imagined what that very emotion would be like.
Right.
This child that is completely dependent upon me.
Yep.
I have just dropped. You can't really explain that. You just have to experience it for yourself. I don't encourage anyone to try and experience it. It's not fun. But
what can be guaranteed
parent,
though is you will fail in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
And goodness, what another sample of why you need the grace of God to go. Yeah, because you're unfortunately going to fail in every aspect of your lives, and this is one that you're particularly sensitive about your failures because you know how much it matters, and it does.
Yeah.
But there's grace. There's grace for you, failing parents. It's okay. You know we all are marked by certain successes and certain failures, and that's what every day is in all regards. So, the last quote in this section says this, quote, parenting then isn't merely about teaching our kids how to live in society, which is a common claim, that it's parenting is about how to teach our kids how to live in society. That's part. He says, quote, it's about showing them the moral weight of their actions, that sin is real, punishment is necessary, though not doled out in anger or caprice, and forgiveness is available. And that is powerful stuff right there. That, yes, you are, as a parent, trying to prepare your child to be ready for the outside world. That should be one of your goals as a parent, not to permanently shield them, but to prepare your child from the outside world. But more than that, show them the moral weight of their actions. That one of the things that has shocked me, even as a person, I mean, I've been in ministry now for 24 years, but we are moral creatures. And if you have not had a child yet, you will see how much moral creatures you are, because when children begin to understand stories, in every story, kids will ask, is that the good guy? Is that the bad guy? Mm-hmm. I mean, constant, because we forget this as adults. We are so much swimming in understanding the world in terms of good and evil that we forget that we began thinking that way at a very, very young age. And we were trained that way by typically our parents, but then as the older we get, the more we are trained by society. This is how you should think about good and evil. But I cannot tell you, in every kind of story, in every kind of trading card, in every kind of video game, any story my kids ever have any access to, they'll say, wait, is that the good guy? Is that the bad guy? So many opportunities for conversations about good and evil.
Yeah.
Because kids are absolutely hungry and thirsting to understand good and evil. They're very interested. Obviously, in movies, you'll have characters who are evil that may not look evil. That will prompt them to have all kinds of questions. Well, that's weird, though, because I would have thought this person over here was evil because they looked rougher. And it is a great opportunity to have conversations that no, look, you can't judge a book by its cover. Evil doesn't always present itself as ugly and these sorts of things, and it's wonderful that way. But man, it's been shocking to me how every day the world we are completely, the way we view the world is fundamentally moral. Yeah, we are always asking questions of good and evil.
Yep. And unfortunately, the gentle parenting style does away with these categories of good and evil, and that's a serious problem.
Yeah. And I mean, this goes together with many other conversations that we have had. We are not saying that you reduce something to sort of like, well, these are the kinds of people who are good and those are the kinds of people. No, we are all sinners and all having an opportunity to repent of every one of those sins and to follow God. Thanks be to Christ who made that opportunity available for us. So we're not naming, this is not about political groups. It's not about saying one nation is good and another. It is, good and evil are complex, but the Bible is the tool to help us to understand and unpack how to understand good and evil and how, I mean, we have had such a theological conversation earlier when you were talking about that the gentle parenting idea is sort of, oh, well, if we were in a situation or a state of nature where the environment doesn't push us towards evil. Well, think about the Bible where Adam and Eve were in an environment that did not prompt them to evil. How were they prompted to evil? Well, it's right there in Genesis 3. The devil prompted them, but found a place in their heart where that evil found a seed and took root and sprouted. And the Bible says sin, when it is fully grown, gives birth to death.
Yeah.
And we have seen that, and we can know that.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. These conversations about good and evil have to happen, and I appreciate your conversation about it. It's not that those people are evil and those people are good, or we are good, they are evil. In fact, what we teach our children, we should, is that we and they are to be opposed to evil, especially and starting with the evil found in us. We are to oppose that.
Yes.
Right? That is a part of what we're wanting to teach them. There's evil in you, and you have to oppose that
Yep.
the same way we oppose it elsewhere.
Yep.
In fact, first and foremost, before we can oppose it elsewhere, we have to oppose it in ourselves.
And if we don't do that, there is a category in the Bible of what you are creating if you teach someone to oppose evil as it is found outside of them and not the evil that is found inside of them, and that is called a Pharisee.
Yeah, hypocrite.
It is a person who loves searching the hearts of others and the motivations of others and the actions of others for evil, but refuses to check their own. And that is what you are creating if you refuse to train a child in how to recognize the evil within them.
Right.
It is worse when I think about the fact that most people who might be attempting this gentle parenting style were not themselves raised in a gentle parenting style. So you are raising a Pharisee when you did not receive that training, and when that is not the way that you were raised. And it is probably a moral blind spot in most instances, but still yet it is a disservice. It is not a helpful way
Right.
to parent. It is, in fact, a very wrong way to parent.
Right. His next section is entitled Gentle and Holy God. And he says this, he, talking about God, he upholds our dignity by holding us morally accountable. And he offers himself in self-giving love to bring back the wayward heart that turns from sin and trusts his grace. And this leads us to the right thing that we are brought to through this method of hey, we don't act as though sin and sinful nature and wickedness doesn't exist in us. What the Lord does for us is that he shows us that. And then by the sacrifice of his own son, he provides a means for us to be brought back to him, right? He provides a means for us to be saved from our sin and what we deserve. You know, when you come to an understanding, is what we've been saying, you have to teach kids. They have to come to an understanding of that wrong things deserve to be punished. That there is good and there is evil, and evil receives punishment, right? That's why we punish our children when they do wrong. When you come to that reality and then recognize the wrong you have done and the one whom you have wronged, when that is a holy God, you have to then beg the question, or should, well, then what do I deserve for having wronged a holy God, for having sinned against a holy God? And again, the Bible gives us that answer. What we deserve is death. What we deserve is an eternity in hell. What we deserve is God's wrath because we have rebelled, because we have sinned against him, because we have done wrong against a God who is holy. But this same holy God is also gentle and kind and is merciful and slow to anger. This is something that we read in, I think Exodus 24, and it's repeated all throughout the scriptures, that he is gentle, he's kind, he's merciful, he's abounding in steadfast love. And he's demonstrated that for us in the gospel, which is what we need, what our children need, and it's how it is what ought to drive our parenting as well.
Yeah.
So really, what we're arguing for is a gospel-driven parenting style and a gospel-motivated parenting style.
Yeah, and all the things that you were just describing remind me of the broad view of gentleness in the scriptures. That gentleness, we do want genuine gentle parenting, but we want all of the fruits of the Spirit present in parenting: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Yep. And this is a short-sighted view. This is not even a gentle parenting solution. Right. It reduces what a human is. It reduces what a child is, and it's not going to be enough. We need more. And so he closes this, and we close this as well by saying that we will have an opportunity as a church. This will fail people, and we are not the kind of people, when someone is in their failure, to say, yep, I told you so. This is when we come in and say, there is grace. There's been grace for me, and there is grace for you. And we then extend that grace and say there's a God in heaven who forgives sins, forgives failures of all kinds, and then has new mercies every morning. And let's have them together.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Amen. That's exactly right. The very end of the article ends with this quote, and I think this is great. As one woman recently testified, so he shifts gears. He begins talking about the church and sort of how this relates to the church. And he quotes one woman who shared her testimony and says, "I love the church because she told me I was sinning when no one else would."
Yeah.
And then he says, "Yes, a stark diagnosis before a magnificent cure." That is what the church is intended to do. That's what we as Christians are intended to do. We do not allow sin to go unexposed. We do not allow people to think they're okay when they're not. We tell them what you are doing is wrong. You're a sinner, and that's a problem. That's where the gospel starts. It starts with the problem of sin, and it's the best thing we can do for people to start by telling them, "Hey, you're a sinner," and then from there to point them to a Savior.
Yep. All right, I think we can leave it there.
I think so.
This has been Empires of the Future,
and we'll see you in the future.